Okay, Marvin. My first question is always the same one. Who is Marvin professionally?
I studied psychology as an undergraduate. I studied it as a grad student, as a doctoral student. So deep down, I'm a psychologist. And the interest was always developmental psychology, how people become what they become. What's the journey we go through in our lives. But I also was interested in ethics and morality and goodness. And so eventually I morphed into thinking about how do people particularly develop a moral sense, or don't develop it. Where does that come from? So my developmental psychology work is always trying to figure out how do people become good or not become good. And ultimately it led me to more applied questions like parenting and schooling, when I realized those were the most formative elements in all of this. I did some work in parenting. I created a parenting model. I didn't do a whole lot with it because I really realized that education was a better delivery system for me, that I could reach more kids. If I can change the whole school, I could reach 500, 1,000 to 8,000, depending on the size of the school, kids. So I focused on applying it to education. And over the years, I morphed from a social scientist into an educational psychologist. And the passion still is trying to make a better world by making better people.
So you passed from working in an academic environment to more working in the field.
Not fully. I was very lucky. I got headhunted for an endowed professorship at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, back in 1997, 98, something like that. And this job was part of a brilliant scheme that a wealthy businessman had, which was for him to give the money to support positions for distinguished professors who would essentially have one foot in the community and one foot in the university, and would use their knowledge to serve the community. Mm-hmm. So part of me is traditional professor, and part of me is contractually required to be out in the community using my knowledge for good.
That's lucky. You've invented the creative model of primate,
right?
Primate model. What is it?
The modus operandi I created early on was to mine the research, the body of research. So when I was working in parenting, I read all the research that had child outcomes that I could consider character, and looked to see what were the common denominators and what parents did that led to character development. And I created a little model with 5 themes that came out of this. So when I turned to schools, I started doing the same thing, started collecting all the research on what works in schools. That was the name of the project, What Works in Character Education. We had a bunch of grants to do that, and collecting it. I did this with Melinda Beer, who's a colleague of mine, and co-directs our center. And we found lots and lots of things that work. So many practices, overwhelming number of practices for which there's research evidence. And then I was asked to communicate this as a distillation of what is effective practice in character education. Well, to give a list of 50 practices in a talk is ridiculous. So that's when I realized I needed to go back to what I had done before and find these common denominators. And in essence, what I ended up with are 6 principles, design principles, that come out of all of the research practices that have been found. And I thought that was a useful way to communicate. I realized eventually these common denominators were higher ordinate design principles, which worked great for me because I don't want to script somebody else's initiative, their implementation model. I don't want to tell them, you have to do this, do this, do this, do this. I want to give them broader stroke principles and help them organically design it for their own situation.
And with those 6 principles you could describe
it. Okay, well,
briefly.
Okay, sure. Sorry, my nose is itching like crazy. Okay. So primed is just an anagram. And in Spanish, we're able to figure out a way to say it. In Spanish, so we keep the anagram, but everywhere else I work, it doesn't mean anything anymore. But in English, the P is for prioritization, which means the development of students' character has to be the top priority in the school. They have to honestly, authentically say, we've succeeded if our kids become good people. It's extra if they become really good academically. But those are really the two main priorities. The R is about relationships. Relationships are essentially the molecules, the building blocks of good character, of great schools, and of academic achievement too. And the research says it again and again and again. So we have to be strategic, intentional, and inclusive in the way we build relationships. And we have to create structures for that. The I is for intrinsic motivation. Everybody loves to run to rewards, public recognitions, and punishments, all the extrinsic motivators. And those don't build character. Character comes from role models. It comes from feeling your voice empowered. It comes from taking a value and internalizing it. And extrinsic motivators don't get us to internalize them. They're just a means to get the reward or avoid the punishment. So we have to teach schools how to do that. They have to get rid of all their extrinsics, and they have to start building a school that authentically represents character. The adults have to authentically model it, and children have to feel emotionally bonded to the schools and classrooms. And then they take it inside. Yeah. The M is for modeling. You can't ask children to be something you can't be yourselves. You have to be the character you want to see in your students. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. Character education, we say, have to be the character you want to see in your students.
Yeah.
And the E is for empowerment. Schools tend to be hierarchical, authoritarian. I consider them benevolent dictatorships. They're benevolent, they love the kids, but they control all the power. And if we're going to live in a democracy, we need to educate for democratic citizenship, and the only way to do that is for children to have the experience of the power of their voice in the common spaces, collaborating together to find the common good.
Right.
And then the D is a tough one to explain. It's developmental pedagogy. The notion is that when a child enters your space in school, they come with a history. Who they are is because of what happened before. And for however long you have them, you're becoming part of their history. And they leave you, they continue on, hopefully for many, many years, as a product of everything that came before they met you, everything that happened when they were with you. And we have to take that perspective on what we do. We're investing in the long life journey of every child. Mm-hmm. And that pedagogy is different than the pedagogy of trying to get results right now, stop the bad behavior now, create the good behavior now, get the academic marks in this part of the school year and so on. I'm not saying those aren't important. The most important thing is who that child is in 20 years. We have to change our pedagogy to serve the long-term development of children. So those are those are the 6 prime elements.
You've worked then with parents, and then you've worked with the schools. I always say that children cannot choose the parents they have or the place they are born. So do you think the school nowadays have the strength to impact in children? Like,
some yes, some no. What do they do? Or do they have the influence? Yes, they always have the influence, right? Are some of them situated where they can have a more positive influence? Some yes, some no. But Aristotle said this over 2,000 years ago. Every adult who's around children is going to impact their character, whether they like it, intend it or not. There's an old Chinese proverb: every passerby leaves their mark on you. There's no off switch to character education. Every teacher's doing it. Every adult who's around kids is doing it. What we want them to do is do it intentionally and effectively for the good. So yeah, every school has the power. Educators have an amazing power. The quote from Chaim Ganot, who talks about how I realize as a teacher, I have an awesome power. I control the climate. I affect whether a child's uplifted or destroyed and so on. They all need to remember that every single day.
Mm-hmm. You've talked, I heard you speaking about the importance of leaders in the school and leadership. What sort of leadership do we need in the school to implement character?
Largely because of my colleague Melinda Beer. Our team, our Center for Character and Citizenship, has focused on servant leadership a lot lately. And I've had that inclination all along, that really the role of the school leader is to serve and empower and equip everybody else to do their best as a teacher, as a student, or whatever. So they have to understand that they are servants. You know, we talk about politicians as public servants, and most politicians I know have lost that notion altogether. They think they're emperors, but they're not supposed to be. They're supposed to be serving the people. At least in a democracy they are. In schools, the leader is the same way. The school leader should be serving the mission of the school. They should be serving and equipping and bringing out the best in every person who's in the school. If they do that really well, then their job is done.
Okay. What happens when a leader cannot change the teachers they have? I mean, how many? What's the percentage of teachers involved in a project for actually be successful?
I always teach leaders a model I have of the 4 W's. The first one is when you become a new leader in a school, people will wait you out. In English, the word wait starts with W. They will wait you out. And so then you have to turn to the second W, which is to work with the willing. Figure out who are the teachers in your school who resonate with your vision, with your purpose, with your educational philosophy. And start with them. And then the third W is you have to win over the people sitting on the fence who haven't committed. And the willing will help you do that. They'll bring their colleagues along. And then, after much work to figure out who will never be able or be willing to join me in building the kind of school I want, you have to win. This is a tough one to translate. To winnow them out, which means to, like weeding, to weed them out, to pull out the weeds and drive them out of the school. And because that's a political issue, it's different in every place. You know, what works in one place doesn't work in another place. So to whatever degree you're able, you want to salvage the cynics. You want to salvage them. Great colleague of mine, brilliant educator from Canada, Avis Glaze, once said, Marvin, if you scratch the surface of a cynic, you find a frustrated idealist. Yes. And sometimes you can release the idealist in people by getting past, scratching away the surface of that. But if you finally decide somebody is not good for children, they have to go and you need to find a way.
Okay, I've done a lot of research on character education and socio-emotional programs, not only in Europe but outside Europe. And one of the things I find is that some of them, lots of them, tend to do socio-emotional education very egotistical, very centered on me and myself, and there is a divorce between the socio-emotional and the ethical education. Do you think it's important to join both?
Yeah, I've been colleagues and friends with the people who started the social emotional learning movement in the United States at Castle, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, and so on. Roger Weisberg was a close friend. He was the executive director of that for a long time, and he and I would battle because he did not want to talk about ethics. He did not want to talk about character. He did not want to talk about values and so on. And so they minimized that. And it was a political choice. They just felt like that would get them less support over the years. And to me, that was intellectual cowardice. It wasn't even really honesty and transparency, because they do have that little piece in there about responsible decision making and what have you. There are others. A lot of the service learning folks did that for a long time, and the positive psych folks to a smaller degree, they're more comfortable with it. The issue is the most important thing we can cultivate in children is human goodness. I mean, if they're not smart, if they're not highly achieving academically, that's unfortunate. If they're evil people who are predators, that's not just unfortunate, that's dangerous and a tragedy. President Theodore Roosevelt once said, to educate a person in mind and not in morals, is to educate a menace to society. We need them both. Martin Luther King said, intelligence plus character, that's the true goal of education. We can hide our heads, pretend, but we don't do any service to the world if we don't address the fact that human goodness is what will take the world forward.
I agree.
Good.
Character education has been linked for many, many years to religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
And I think nowadays, with the secularization of many places in the world and the radicalization of the religions in other parts of the world, it's a very tricky relation. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I've dealt with this forever. One, there are misconceptions and stereotypes. Two, misconceptions and stereotypes are often based in some truth and some reality. I know more about the U.S., a little bit about Spain. In the U.S., historically, yes, education was grounded in Christianity. And we had, like all over Europe, we had our battles between the Protestants and the Catholics, and and dominance and all of that. So character education also was greatly tied to the same kinds of notions. I don't know who that is. Thought maybe Nicole, sorry. But character education, has been linked historically to religion and so on. But in the United States, legally we can't do that. Public schools can't use religion and so on. Nobody has a monopoly on morality and human goodness. Philosophy does it, theology does it, religions do it, secular groups do it, parents do it, schools do it, businesses do it. It's the eternal question: how do we socialize each subsequent generation to responsibly inherit and shepherd what we bequeath to them, the world we give them? So can religion be wed to this? Certainly. And religion can help in certain ways. Can religion undermine it? Sure. Just as religion can cause wars and stop wars. And so, but when religions say we have the one truth, to me, that's foolish. Because what are you saying to 99% of the rest of the planet who don't belong to your religion, who are also grappling with human goodness and so on? So it has to be an ecumenical issue, at least within religion, but it has to recognize that agnosticism, atheism, also are responsible shepherds of human goodness. It's just part of the human condition. And religion can be one way to make sense of it and to enhance it. And religion can get in the way of it. I work with secular groups, religious groups of all religions, with orthodox religions of different religions, with more liberal sides of different religions. We were told in Spain that they don't want to hear the terms virtues or moral or character. They wanted social emotional learning and other things. We see that in other places as well. I've come to the point where I talk about the semantic morass. All these words that are out there. As I move around the world, the words change. As I wait over history, words change. I don't care what you call it anymore, as long as what you're doing is evidence-based work that helps children become the best human beings they can become.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Good.
You work in many countries.
Mm-hmm.
You travel a lot. Is there a difference? The culture makes a difference in the way we educate character in children.
Yes, there are differences across cultures, not as much as most people assume. So there are universals there that apply everywhere. What helps the kid flourish are the same things everywhere. It's feeling love. It's feeling like you matter. It's feeling that you can make a difference in the world. It's feeling like you're connected to community and your relationships with others. It's true everywhere. It doesn't matter where you are. Okay? How it manifests particularly may vary from culture to culture. Some cultures are definitely more uncomfortable with some of the truth that we've unearthed. Some cultures are too hierarchical. They don't like the idea of empowerment. Some cultures, because of the hierarchical notion, don't want to have close relationships with students. As you move from culture to culture. But I don't believe in pandering to people who reject universal truths. So my job is to get them to understand that they're hurting themselves by not embracing these ways of being with children.
And is evil growing up?
Is evil increasing?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have. I'd say no.
Are you
My answer is
pessimistic or optimistic?
I'm optimistic, but I'm long-term optimistic. There's the famous quote from Martin Luther King that the arc of justice is long, but the arc of history is long, but bends towards justice. And there are other things, Pinker and others who have gone out there and studied this. I believe, as a woman in Spain, which century prior to this would you be better off? None. Okay, that's a minority. I'm Jewish. As a Jew in Spain, what prior century would I be better off having lived then? When in history, if I'm a disabled person, if I'm a gay person, what prior time in history, human rights are increasing. Are we there yet? We're not there. But I am utterly confident 100 years from now, on the average, the world will be more moral. I think 200 years from now, on the average, there'll be more moral. But this is the way, the course of history goes. It's not a smooth line. And so are there in the short term, are we becoming more evil right now? Maybe. But over the long term, it will still go up.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
There is a certain, in education around the world, I do travel a lot, there's a certain fascination for technology nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And some people just think everything is going to be changed because artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Is artificial intelligence making us more intelligent, or are we going to be... I have the feeling that in many contexts technology is making children and youngsters so more passive about the world. It's open windows to know the world, but it's making them less active to actually be compassionate with that world.
So there are a lot of questions in that one. Let me put it in context. In your lifetime, in my lifetime, we've seen lots of technologies arise. And in every single case, the doomsayers, this is the end of human society, the humans. Whether it was, inventing the horseless carriage, or the telegraph, or the telephone, or the television, or the wireless telephone, or the computer, or the internet, and we can go on and on, nuclear energy and everything else. And so far, none of them have destroyed humanity. Well, this is the next one. Will this be the one that's different than all the others? My guess is no. Okay. Did each of those things change our existence? Every one of them did. Some ways for the better, some ways for the worse. But none of them have been Armageddon, and I don't think this one will be Armageddon. So are there challenges we need to face in children having cell phones in school, in children disappearing into social media and not having face-to-face relationships with people? Yes. Will we surmount them? Yeah, I think we will. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out ways to limit it and control it. We haven't blown ourselves up with the nuclear bombs yet. Maybe we will someday. I'm hoping we won't. Likewise, will artificial intelligence be our destruction? It's possible. I don't think it will. I've always been a science fiction fan for my leisure reading. So I can't tell you how many books I've read about how artificial intelligence eventually, the robots turn on us and this turns on and that turns on us. Is it possible? I imagine it's possible. I don't think it's something to ignore, but I don't think we've yet figured out the full way to destroy ourselves. I think the two things that worry me more than artificial intelligence, are the destruction of the climate, that we may make the planet uninhabitable someday, and the ease of access to weapons of mass destruction. That now it's not a nation that has to shoot off this multi-million dollar rocket to blow somebody up, that somebody can walk in with a suitcase or use a biochemical weapon that an individual can carry in a little bottle or something. Those are the two things that are different than when I first thought about this. Maybe AI is the third one, I don't know. but I'm still an optimist.
I would talk to you for
I know,
hours.
we better stop.
Or
We
we'll
better
do
stop.
one day.
We can
But
do it
I
soon.
always end with one question.
Yeah.
I mean, please, Cuadernos de Pedagogía gets to more than 50,000 teachers around the world. And I always ask for a message to those teachers from the hope that you transmit in your message.
Okay. Teaching is not a job. It's not even a profession. It's a calling. It's a calling to service. It's the service to the futures of your children. Never forget that, and never forget that you have awesome power. Everything you say, everything you do touches children. When you feel professionally impotent, I'm not reaching them. They're not behaving better. They're not learning this concept. They're not mastering this skill. Never let yourself feel like you have no influence. You have massive influence. Everything you say to a child has the potential of changing their life course. And when you have awesome power, you need to be careful and wield it responsibly. Because behind every person of success, there was a great teacher. Be that great teacher.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Marvin. It's
You're
been a
welcome.
real pleasure to meet you.
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yes, great.